A Mafia boss saw a young woman holding her unconscious brother on the street, and what happened next shocked everyone. Tristan stopped when his eyes met the image of a girl sitting under the awning of a closed store, cradling her little brother in her arms. The boy lay motionless, his face pale and grimy, while his sister cried silently, holding him tight as if afraid to lose the only thing she had left in this world. Tristan felt his chest tighten at the sight of that heartbreaking scene. He approached them slowly, his legs feeling heavy, each step a battle against an invisible force. The noise of the city seemed distant now, drowned out by the intensity of the moment that would change everything in his life. The girl looked up when she noticed the man in the black suit approaching, and Tristan could see the fear mixed with a flicker of hope. Tears still streamed down her dirty face, creating clean trails on skin that had been hardened by the streets. The little boy remained still in her arms, breathing weakly and irregularly, his skin ashen and his lips slightly blue. Tristan stopped 2 meters away, not wanting to frighten the girl who was already clearly terrified. The scene was even more devastating up close. He could see that their clothes were stained and torn, that the boy's shoes had holes, that both were far too thin for their ages. The smell of dirt and sickness reached him, mixed with something he recognized as the scent of prolonged hunger. The girl held her brother tighter when she saw Tristan stop, as if he were her entire universe, and any shadow might snatch him away. Tristan observed how her thin, soot-covered fingers dug into her brother's shirt, as if that gesture could protect him from all the evil in the world. The bare feet of the boy were cut and swollen, marked by the hot asphalt and the cold of nights on the street. The reality of this situation began to settle into Tristan's mind overwhelmingly. These two weren't here by accident or temporarily. They were living in this condition, sleeping on the hard ground, starving, facing dangers he couldn't even imagine. "Stay back. I don't have anything for you to take." The girl's voice came out weak, trembling, filled with a fear that no young woman should know. Tristan felt a rare sting in his eyes, sting when he heard those words. What kind of world was this, where a girl had to be afraid even when asking for help? What kind of person had he become, that a young woman had to fear his approach? He slowly crouched down, getting to their level, trying to appear less threatening. His expensive suit got dirty on the sidewalk floor, but that didn't matter to him anymore. For the first time in decades, Tristan didn't care about appearances or what others would think seeing him crouched on the dirty street. "I'm not here to take anything. Your brother needs a doctor." His voice came out huskier than he expected. The girl studied his face for a few seconds, as if trying to decide whether she could trust this well-dressed stranger. Tristan could see the intelligence in her eyes, a premature wisdom that only comes from suffering. She had learned to survive by reading people, identifying who represented danger and who might offer salvation. It was a skill that most young women her age would never need to develop, but for her, it was a matter of life or death. Tristan noticed the small scars on her hands, marks that told stories of violence and neglect that he preferred not to imagine. "My brother is very sick, sir. He hasn't woken up for 2 days." Her voice broke at the end of the sentence, and she lowered her head to look at her brother with a tenderness that broke Tristan's heart. "I tried to give him water, but he can't swallow. I don't know what to do anymore." The desperation in her voice was palpable, weighted by a responsibility too heavy for such young shoulders. Tristan realized the girl was trembling, not only from fear but also from exhaustion and hunger. She probably hadn't slept properly for days, watching over her sick brother, trying to keep him alive with the few resources she had. The dedication of this young woman was something Tristan had rarely seen even among adults. Tristan moved a little closer, observing the boy's condition. His breathing was clearly compromised. His skin was too hot, and there were obvious signs of severe dehydration. His lips were cracked, the skin around his eyes was dark and sunken, and his small hands were cold, despite the fever. This child needed urgent medical attention, or he wouldn't survive the next few hours. The reality of the situation hit him like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't just a matter of charity or kindness, it was literally a matter of life and death. "What are your names?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm despite the desperation he felt growing inside him. He needed to establish a connection, gain the girl's full trust to be able to help effectively. Every second lost could be crucial to saving the boy's life. "I'm Ava, and he's Noah." "We don't have anyone else, sir. Our mom died 4 months ago, and we've been living on the streets ever since." Ava wiped her nose with the back of her hand, smearing grime across her already soiled face. "I take care of him, sir. I've always taken care of him, but now he's very sick and I don't know what to do. People walk by and pretend they don't see us. She said those last words with a bitterness that shouldn't exist in someone so young. Tristan could see that Ava had lost faith in humanity, that she no longer expected kindness from strangers. The way she held her brother, protecting him instinctively even while asking for help, showed that she had learned to trust only herself. Anger rose in Tristan's throat like hot lava. How was it possible that two people were here clearly needing help, and people just walked by as if they were invisible? How had he himself been one of those people for so long? How many times had he passed by similar situations and chosen not to see? Guilt weighed on him like a giant rock. He was part of this cruel system that allowed people to die on the streets, while others accumulated fortunes. Tristan remembered the times he had complained about insignificant problems, like traffic or the food at the expensive restaurant he frequented. How many people like Ava and Noah existed in the city while he worried about trivialities? Ava, you've been very brave taking care of your brother, but now I'm going to help you, okay? Tristan slowly extended his hand, allowing the girl to decide if she wanted to accept the contact. The gesture needed to come from her, needed to be her choice. Force wouldn't work here, only trust could save these lives. Tristan noticed that his own hands were trembling, not from fear, but from an emotion he couldn't name. It was a mixture of compassion, urgency, and something he had never felt before, the genuine desire to save a life without expecting anything in return. Ava looked at the extended hand, then at Tristan's face, trying to read his intentions. Tristan could see the internal conflict in the girl. She desperately wanted to trust, but life had taught her to be cautious. Probably other people had approached her before, perhaps with not so noble intentions. The distrust in Ava's eyes told a story of disappointments and betrayals that broke his heart. For a moment, Tristan saw a ghost of his own past in her, a boy lost in the same cold wind of Chicago, surviving on nothing but survival instinct. He knew this darkness better than anyone, for he had once called it home. No one had extended a hand to him then. He had clawed his way out of the darkness alone, building an empire from nothing but rage and determination. But the cost had been everything: his humanity, his capacity to feel, his soul. Looking at Ava now, protecting her brother with every fiber of her being, he saw the same fire that had once burned in him. But her fire was different. It burned not from hatred, but from love. In that moment, the iron facade of the man known as the Shadow began to crack. After a few seconds that seemed eternal, she extended her small, dirty hand and held Tristan's, and in that simple touch, two broken souls found the beginning of something neither had dared to hope for: a chance at redemption. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that will move your soul. Tristan turned his head toward the sleek black Maybach parked a few meters away, where Raymond stood waiting, his face unable to hide his astonishment. He signaled with a brief nod, and Raymond understood at once, striding quickly to open the rear door. Ava followed the motion with her gaze, her green eyes widening as she took in a luxury car unlike anything she had ever seen in her life. She tightened her hold on Noah, her instinct for self-defense surging hard even though only seconds earlier she had taken the hand of this unfamiliar man. Who was he, that he rode in a car like that? What did he want from her and her little brother? The questions spun through Ava's mind like an unending storm. "Who are you?" Ava asked, her voice trembling though she fought to keep it steady. "Where are you taking us?" Tristan did not answer right away. He rose, brushing lightly at the dust on the knee of his expensive suit pants, not caring that the grime had already pressed itself into the fabric. His eyes looked down at Ava, yet it was not the look of contempt or threat. It was the gaze of someone who had made a decision and had no intention of explaining it. "Somewhere with a doctor." His voice was low and final. "With every minute that passes, your brother loses another chance to live. You can sit here and ask me who I am, or you can get in the car and let me save him." Ava felt as if she were being torn in two. Part of her screamed that this was madness, that she could not trust a stranger in an expensive suit in the middle of the night in this poor neighborhood. But another part of her, the part that had watched Noah grow weaker over the past 2 days, the part that had prayed to anyone who might listen, knew she had no other choice. She looked down at her brother's pallid face, at the cracked, dry lips that had turned a bruised shade of purple, at the breath so faint she had to bring her ear close just to hear it. If she did nothing, Noah would die. And if she climbed into that car with this man, then at least her brother still had a chance. "All right," Ava said, her voice no more than a whisper. "But if you hurt us, you have nothing to bargain with. Tristan cut her off, but not with cruelty. "Get in the car." He bent down, and before Ava could react, Tristan gently lifted Noah from her arms. She nearly cried out in protest, but the way he carried the boy, carefully supporting his head and keeping that small body from jolting, silenced her. This was not how someone with bad intentions treated his prey. Tristan moved quickly toward the car, and Ava hurried after him, her bare feet burning against the road, though she could no longer feel it. Raymond held the door wide, his eyes flicking over Ava with measured scrutiny, but he said nothing. Tristan placed Noah on the back seat with a gentleness that was almost startling, then motioned for Ava to get in after him. She climbed inside and immediately pulled Noah's head onto her lap, trembling fingers smoothing the filthy matted hair. Tristan took the front seat beside Raymond, and the car surged into the night. "Dr. Crane," Tristan said into the phone, his voice as cold as a command rather than a request. "Prepare the emergency room. A child of 8 years old, severe pneumonia, extreme dehydration, unconscious for 2 days. I will arrive in 15 minutes. He ended the call without waiting for a reply. Raymond glanced into the rearview mirror, his eyes meeting Tristan's for the briefest moment. In 20 years of following the boss, Raymond had never seen him do anything like this. Tristan Blackwood did not save people. Tristan Blackwood did not care about the homeless on the streets. But tonight, something had shifted, and Raymond was wise enough not to ask why. Ava sat curled in the corner of the car, holding Noah tight, her eyes never leaving the man in front. She watched everything, from the glossy black leather interior, to the way Raymond called him boss, to the blank, emotionless expression on Tristan's face as he stared out the window. She did not know what world she was stepping into. She did not know who this man truly was. She did not know what price would be demanded for this help. But when she felt Noah's weak breath against her skin, Ava knew she would trade anything, even her own soul, to save her brother. The Maybach turned onto a lane shaded by towering old oak trees, and Ava had to hold her breath as the massive iron gate slowly opened in front of them. Beyond it stood a mansion she had only ever seen in films about the wealthy, with warm golden lights washing over a white stone facade, marble steps leading up to the main entrance, and a vast garden stretching into the dark. Ava had never imagined that people truly lived in places like this, and the contrast between the cold sidewalk where she had been sitting and the palace now before her struck so hard she could not form a single word. But she had no time to be stunned, because the moment the car came to a stop, the front door swung wide and a salt-and-pepper-haired man in a white coat stepped out, followed by 2 uniformed staff pushing a portable gurney. Tristan got out first, opened the rear door, and gently lifted Noah into his arms. The salt-and-pepper-haired man moved in at once, his practiced hands checking the boy's pulse and pupils the instant Tristan laid Noah on the gurney. Ava scrambled out after them, almost falling because her bare feet had gone numb, but she did not let that slow her. She ran alongside the gurney as it was rushed into the house, her heart beating wildly when she saw her brother's pale face under the harsh, bright lights. He looked severely dehydrated and malnourished. "I suspect advanced pneumonia. We need tests immediately. Body temperature of 40 degrees, heart rate weak and irregular. We need fluids immediately, and we need to start high-dose antibiotics." They wheeled Noah into a room already prepared, with a hospital bed, a heart monitor, and all kinds of medical equipment Ava could not name. She stood in the corner, arms wrapped around herself, watching Dr. Crane and the assistants work at a dizzying speed. They started an intravenous line in Noah's thin arm, pressed electrodes to his chest to track his heartbeat, and placed an oxygen tube at his nose. Every movement was precise and urgent, and Ava realized this was not the first time this room had been used for something like this. After about 20 minutes that felt endless, Dr. Crane finally stopped, exhaled, and turned to Ava. His expression was so grave she felt her knees threaten to give way. "If you had come a few hours later, this child would not have made it," he said, his voice low and heavy. "His lungs are severely infected, and his body is so dehydrated that his organs have begun to weaken. He has fought incredibly hard, but if we had not intervened in time..." He did not finish, but Ava understood. She understood she had almost lost Noah, that if that stranger had not appeared, if she had stayed on the sidewalk praying into empty air, her brother would have died in her arms before the sun rose. The realization crashed into Ava like a tidal wave, and she collapsed, her knees hitting the floor, a sob tearing up from deep in her chest, as though someone had just ripped her heart open. She cried from fear, from relief, from guilt, from every feeling she had been holding back for 4 months, finally finding a way out. That night stretched on like a nightmare with no end. Ava sat by Noah's bed, gripping his small hand in hers, eyes fixed on the heart monitor blinking in a steady rhythm. She did not dare sleep. She did not dare leave for even a second, because she feared that if she let go, Noah would slip from her forever. From time to time, Dr. Crane returned to check on him, to adjust the dosage, to change the fluid bag. And each time he gave a small, satisfied nod, Ava felt as if she could breathe a little more. She did not notice Tristan's presence until her gaze drifted by chance toward the dark corner of the room. He stood there, back against the wall, arms folded across his chest, eyes watching everything in absolute silence. Ava did not know how long he had been there, did not know why he was still here instead of returning to his own life, but she was too exhausted to ask. She simply turned back to Noah and kept watch over him the way she had for 4 months. When the first threads of dawn began to slip through the gap in the curtains, Noah's fever finally broke. His skin was no longer burning, his breathing had steadied, and the color slowly returned to his lips. Ava held her breath when she saw Noah's eyelids tremble, and then, like a miracle she did not dare believe in, the familiar brown eyes slowly opened. "Sister, Ava." Noah's voice was as weak as a whisper, but to Ava, it was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard in her life. "I am here," Ava sobbed, tears spilling without control as she leaned down to hold him, careful not to touch the intravenous line. "I am here. You are going to be all right. You are going to be all right." From the corner of the room, Tristan quietly left, his footsteps making no sound on the wooden floor. He stood out in the hallway, his back against the cold wall, and closed his eyes for a brief moment. He did not know why the sight of the siblings holding each other made his chest ache, did not know why the image of the little sister he couldn't save suddenly returned with such haunting clarity. Dr. Crane stepped out, nodded to Tristan, and gave a brief report. "The boy is out of danger, but he needs treatment for 2 to 3 weeks to recover fully. His lungs are still weak, and the malnutrition will take time to improve." Tristan nodded, then walked into the room. Ava looked up at him, her eyes swollen red from crying yet still lit with that familiar wariness. He motioned for her to come out into the hallway, and after a moment of hesitation, she set Noah's hand back on the pillow and followed. "You and your brother will stay here until he is completely well," Tristan said, his tone not an offer but almost an order. Ava stared at him, her eyes narrowing. "Why are you helping us? What do you want?" Tristan met her gaze without blinking. "I just do not like seeing children die on the streets." Silence stretched between them, heavy and full of suspicion. Finally Ava spoke, her voice hard even though her body was shaking with exhaustion. "Fine, we will stay, but when Noah is well, we will leave. I do not want to owe anyone anything." Tristan did not answer. He only turned and walked away, leaving Ava standing alone in the hallway flooded with the light of dawn, with thousands of unanswered questions spinning through her mind. A week passed inside the Blackwood estate, and Noah recovered a little more with each day. Color returned to the boy's cheeks, and his brown eyes were no longer dull, but began to glint with the curiosity of an 8-year-old. He could sit up now, eat thin rice porridge, and he even started talking more to Dr. Crane whenever the doctor came to examine him. Ava watched her brother grow stronger day by day, and she felt as if an enormous stone were slowly being lifted off her chest. But that relief could not erase the unease that was steadily swelling inside her. The room they had been given was a sprawling suite on the 2nd floor of the mansion, with 2 double beds covered in spotless white quilts, a private bathroom lined with marble, and windows that looked out over the lush garden behind the house. It was the kind of room Ava had only ever seen in tattered old magazines she found on the street, and sleeping on a soft bed instead of cold concrete made her feel as though she had stepped into a strange dream. But Ava knew too well that nothing came free, and this luxury would surely have a price. She began to study everything around her, with her suspicious gaze of someone who had learned how to survive on the streets. She realized this mansion was not like an ordinary rich man's home. There were security men in black suits, stationed at every corner of the hallways, their eyes sharp and always alert. Everyone who came and went through the house lowered their heads to Tristan with something closer to fear than respect. And the air inside the estate always carried an invisible tension Ava could not name. She noticed there were private meetings late at night in Tristan's study, phone calls spoken in low, threatening voices, and men with faces as cold as stone who arrived and left in absolute silence. One night, when Ava could not sleep because her thoughts would not stop, she decided to leave the room and get a glass of water from the kitchen. She moved quietly along the corridor, her bare feet making no sound on the thick velvet carpet. But she stopped when she heard the voices of 2 guards posted near the stairwell. Survival instinct pulled her into a darker corner. She held her breath and listened. "Has Boss Blackwood finished dealing with the docks yet?" one man asked in a low voice. "He has," the other answered, his tone carrying both admiration and fear. "The Shadow never misses anything. That is why he is the most feared man in Chicago. Heard it was 3 guys this time. Had the nerve to mess with his goods. Castellan must have lost his mind to pick a fight with the boss. Everybody knows you touch Blackwood. You are looking for your own death." Ava felt the blood in her veins turn to ice. The Shadow. She had heard that name on the streets, in the whispered stories traded between the homeless and petty criminals. The Shadow was a name people spoke with pure fear. The most ruthless mafia boss in Chicago. The man who controlled the entire underworld with an iron hand and never forgave anyone who dared betray him. And that man, the one the criminals of Chicago feared, was Tristan Blackwood, the man who had saved Noah, the man who was letting them stay in this house. Ava went back to the suite on shaking legs, closed the door carefully behind her, and pressed her back against the wall, forcing herself to control her ragged breathing. She was inside the lair of a mafia boss. She and Noah were living under the roof of a killer. Her first instinct was to gather their things and scoop Noah up and run immediately. Run as far from this house as possible, no matter the darkness and the danger outside. But then she looked at the bed where Noah slept, her brother's face peaceful, and his breathing so much steadier than it had been a week ago, and she knew she could not do it. Noah was still not strong enough to leave. Dr. Crane had said he needed at least 2 to 3 more weeks of treatment. If she took Noah out now, back onto the streets, he would not survive. Ava clenched her hands into fists, her nails digging so deep into her palms it stung. She was trapped. Trapped between fear of a mafia boss and love for her brother. She had no choice but to stay, to keep quiet, and to wait until Noah was strong enough for them to leave. She would not let Noah know the truth. She would not let him be afraid. She would not let him worry about anything. She would protect him at any cost, even if it meant living under the same roof as the Shadow. The next morning, as Ava sat beside Noah and tried to hide the dark circles under her eyes from a sleepless night, the boy suddenly spoke in a bright, innocent voice. "Sister, Uncle Tristan is so good," Noah said, his brown eyes lighting up. "Yesterday he came by and asked if I needed anything. He looks so serious, but I am not scared. He feels like a knight from a fairy tale, does he not, sister? A knight in black who saves the princess and the prince from the cold streets." Ava felt her heart tighten at the innocence in his words. She pulled Noah into her arms, careful not to let him see the wet blur in her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered into her brother's ear, her voice trembling even as she tried to stay calm. "He is very good." But inside Ava, fear was screaming. She knew the knight in a fairy tale did not carry a nickname like the Shadow, and he certainly did not rule the largest criminal empire in Chicago. On the 10th day, Noah was well enough to leave the bed and take his first unsteady steps around the room. Dr. Crane said the boy was recovering better than expected, and that gentle movement would help his body regain strength more quickly. Ava was overjoyed to see her little brother slowly becoming the lively child he once was, but she was also anxious, because Noah had begun to grow curious and wanted to explore this enormous house. She had tried to keep him in the room as much as possible, but one afternoon, when she stepped into the bathroom for only a few minutes, she came back out to find the bed empty and the door left slightly ajar. Noah wandered along the long corridor with wide eyes full of wonder. He had never seen a house so large, with paintings hanging on the walls, fresh flower arrangements set on oak tables, and thick plush carpets underfoot. He passed many closed doors, not daring to open them, because Sister Ava had told him he must not touch other people's things without permission. But when he reached the end of the hallway, a large wooden door stood cracked open by a narrow slit, and the dim light inside drew the curiosity of an 8-year-old. Noah pushed the door gently and stepped in, then stopped when he realized the room was filled with books. Tall wooden shelves packed with volumes rose all the way to the ceiling on all 4 walls. A large desk stood in the center, and beside the window there was an armchair with someone sitting in it. Tristan Blackwood sat there, alone in the darkness, eyes turned toward the garden outside, without truly seeing anything. He had not turned on the lights. Only the weak light of late afternoon slipped through the thin curtains, casting bands of shadow and pale gold across his rugged face. "Uncle." Noah's voice rang out in the stillness, clear and unafraid. Are you sad? Why are you sitting alone in the dark? Tristan turned his head, surprise flickering briefly in his eyes when he saw the boy standing in the doorway. He was not accustomed to anyone intruding into his private space, and he was even less accustomed to a child looking at him with curiosity instead of fear. The adults in his world either bowed their heads in front of him or tried to hide the tremor in their voices. But this boy, with large brown eyes and a face still a little pale from illness, looked at him as though he were simply an ordinary man who needed comfort. I am not sad, Tristan answered, his voice low and slightly hoarse from going too long without speaking. Noah did not believe him. The boy walked farther into the room, small feet moving over the thick carpet without making a sound. He came closer to the desk, and his eyes caught on an old framed photograph set near the corner. In the picture was a family of 4, a middle-aged man with a gentle smile, a beautiful woman with long black hair, and 2 children, a boy of about 15 with familiar gray eyes, and a little girl of about 7 or 8, laughing brightly in her brother's arms. Who are they? Noah asked, his small finger pointing at the photograph. Tristan followed the line of that finger, and his body went rigid as if someone had driven a knife straight into his chest. He was silent for a long time, so long that Noah thought he had not heard the question at all. Then his voice came, rough and heavy. They are gone. Noah fell quiet for a moment, then lifted his face to Tristan with eyes that seemed older than his years. Like my mom. My mom is gone too. I miss her so much. Every night I dream about her, and when I wake up I cry, because I know she is not here. Tristan looked at the boy, and for a brief moment, the cold shell he had built over 22 years seemed to crack, just a hairline fracture. This child understood the pain of loss, understood the loneliness of loving someone who had already left the world. And somehow, that innocent understanding touched something deep inside Tristan that he had believed dead for a very long time. Noah. Ava's voice burst from the doorway, sharp with panic. She had run all through the mansion searching for him, and when she saw Noah standing with Tristan in the dark room, her heart nearly leapt out of her chest. She rushed in, yanked Noah back behind her, and stared at Tristan with wary eyes as though he were a wild animal ready to strike. Tristan rose from the armchair, his tall frame seeming to fill the room. He looked at Ava, saw the fear in her eyes, and something that felt like disappointment flickered through him, though he did not understand why. You do not need to be afraid, he said, his voice returning to its familiar chill. I do not hurt children. Ava did not answer. She gripped Noah's hand tightly and pulled him out of the room. Her steps hurried as if she were fleeing danger, but as she turned away, she could not stop thinking about Tristan's eyes when he looked at that family photograph, and she realized that perhaps, beneath the cold exterior of the most notorious Mafia boss in Chicago, there was a pain she had never known existed. While the Blackwood estate slowly filled with Noah's laughter, another darkness was quietly drawing near. On the other side of the city, inside a mansion no less luxurious yet steeped in a far more oppressive air, Jerome Castellan sat behind a massive ebony desk, his dark brown eyes cold as a venomous snake's as he stared at the underling trembling in front of him. Jerome was the second most powerful mafia boss in Chicago, a man who had spent his entire life competing with Tristan Blackwood, only to be crushed again and again beneath the shadow of the shadow. He was 42 years old, with black hair beginning to silver at the temples, and a long scar running from the corner of his left eye down to his chin, a souvenir from a confrontation with Tristan years ago that he had never been able to forget. Report. Jerome's voice cut through the room, not loud, yet sharp enough to make the listener shiver. The underling swallowed, forcing his voice to steady. Boss, we have confirmed the information. Blackwood is sheltering a young woman and a child inside his estate. The girl is around 20 years old. The child is her younger brother, around 8. They are homeless. Blackwood picked them up from the streets nearly 2 weeks ago. Jerome arched an eyebrow, curiosity surfacing on his weathered face. Tristan Blackwood, the Shadow, a man infamous for his coldness and brutality, had suddenly gone and rescued homeless people. It was nothing like the man Jerome knew. In their underworld, pity was a fatal weakness, and Tristan had never shown weakness in 20 years. Interesting, Jerome said slowly, his fingers tapping lightly on the desktop. Find out who that girl is. I want to know everything about her, from the day she was born until now. Do not miss a single detail. 3 days later, the underling returned with a thick dossier, setting it on the desk before Jerome with hands that still shook slightly. Jerome opened it and skimmed the first pages with practiced indifference. But then his eyes stopped on a name, and his entire body went rigid, as if lightning had struck him. Thomas Monroe. Jerome read the name aloud, his voice hissing through clenched teeth like a snake. The girl's father is Thomas Monroe. Memory surged back like a flood. 10 years earlier, Thomas Monroe had been Jerome's most trusted right hand, the man who held every financial secret of the organization, the man Jerome had trusted like a brother. But then one night, Thomas vanished with $2 million in cash and all the documents that could destroy Jerome if they fell into the wrong hands. Jerome had hunted him for 3 years, turning every corner of the city inside out, hiring the best private investigators money could buy. But Thomas Monroe had seemed to dissolve into the air, leaving not a single trace behind. He had a wife and 2 children, Jerome murmured, reading on. Wife died 4 months ago of cancer. 2 children, a girl named Ava, 20 years old, and a boy named Noah, 8 years old, have been living on the streets since then. He paused, and a cold smile slowly spread across his mouth. Thomas Monroe, he escaped me. He lived a normal life somewhere for 10 years, but he is dead now, or he is still hiding. It does not matter. His daughter cannot hide from me. Jerome rose and walked to the window overlooking Chicago, drowned in night. In his mind, a perfect plan was taking shape. Ava Monroe was not only the daughter of a traitor, she was also an unexpected weakness in Tristan Blackwood. Why would the shadow protect a homeless girl? There was something here, some connection Jerome did not yet understand, but he knew he would exploit it to the end. Blackwood wants to protect her. Jerome turned back, his eyes bright with malice. Good, very good. I will make him pay for that weakness. The girl will be bait to lure him into a trap, and when he is caught, I will end it all. The shadow will fall because of a girl from the streets, and I will take my revenge on Thomas Monroe through his daughter. 1 arrow, 2 targets. He laughed, the sound echoing through the dark room like the cry of a crow announcing ill fortune. On the other side of the city, Ava sat beside Noah, not knowing that the past of the father she hated was returning to threaten her own future. And Tristan Blackwood, the man she still feared and distrusted, might be the only one who could protect her from the storm that was coming. 2 weeks had passed since Ava and Noah came to the Blackwood estate, and everything had slowly settled into a strange rhythm she never would have expected. Noah was fully well now, the boy running everywhere, spoiled like a blood relative by Maggie, the older housekeeper with silver hair and a gentle smile. Ava still kept her distance from everyone, especially from Tristan, but her first fear had gradually been replaced by a confusion she could not explain. She knew who he was. She knew what he had done, yet she also saw the way he treated Noah, saw the way he watched from a distance without ever intruding, and she could not fit those pieces together into anything whole. That night, Ava was jolted awake by the familiar nightmare. She dreamed she was sitting on the cold sidewalk, Noah in her arms, but this time he was not breathing. She screamed, she begged, but no one stopped. People just kept walking as if she were invisible. When she woke, Ava realized she was crying, sweat soaking the back of her shirt, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. She looked to the bed beside her and saw Noah asleep, his breathing steady, and relief rushed through her. But she knew she would not be able to sleep again, not tonight. She left the room, bare feet moving softly over the cold wooden floor, intending to go downstairs for a glass of water. But as she passed through the first-floor hallway, she noticed a weak golden light spilling from the crack beneath the door of Tristan's study. She stopped, hesitated, instinct urging her to turn around and go back. Yet something held her there, a curiosity she could not restrain, and before she could think, she pushed the door gently and stepped inside. Tristan sat in the armchair by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand already half gone, eyes fixed on the empty space before him. He did not turn when he heard the door, as if he already knew someone had come, or as if he no longer cared. Ava stood on the threshold, unsure whether to go forward or back away, and then Tristan spoke, his voice low and weary. "Can you not sleep either?" Ava stepped in and closed the door behind her. "Nightmares," she answered curtly, offering no further explanation. Tristan nodded as if he understood, as if he too was intimately familiar with sleepless nights and ghosts from the past. He pointed to the chair across from him, a wordless invitation, and after a brief hesitation, Ava sat. They were silent for a long time, with only the steady tick of the old clock on the wall and the soft wind slipping through the window. Ava looked around the room, and her eyes once again stopped on the family photograph on the desk. She remembered Noah's question, remembered Tristan's brief, painful answer, and before she could stop herself, she asked, "You have a family in that picture. What happened to them?" Tristan did not answer right away. He lifted the glass to his mouth, took a long swallow, then set it down on the table beside him with a soft clink. When he spoke, his voice was strangely calm, as if he were telling someone else's story. "I lost them when I was 15. My parents, my sister, all of them in one night. They were killed because my father refused to sell land to a criminal organization. I was the only one who survived, because that night I slipped out to see friends without permission." Ava felt as if someone had just crushed the air out of her heart. She had never expected that behind the cold, frightening exterior of Chicago's most notorious Mafia boss was a 15-year-old boy who had lost everything. "After that, I lived on the streets for 2 years, Tristan continued, his eyes still focused on nothing. "No one helped me. No one even looked at me. I had to crawl out of the mud with my bare hands, by any means I could. And when I was strong enough, I went back for the people who killed my family." He did not say more, but Ava understood. She understood Tristan had not chosen to become Mafia. He had been pushed onto that road by a world that turned its back on him when he needed help most. She thought of her own days on the streets, remembered how people walked past as if she and Noah did not exist. And she realized that without Tristan, she might have become a different version of herself. "I understand," Ava said softly, her voice trembling. "My mother died 4 months ago. Cancer. I took care of her for 2 years. I quit school, I quit work, I gave up everything. But in the end, I still could not save her. I watched her go right in front of me, and there was nothing I could do." Tears began to run down her cheeks, but she did not bother to wipe them away. "I feel guilty every day. If I had made more money, if I had taken her to a doctor earlier, You did everything you could." Tristan cut her off, his voice still low, but with a gentleness Ava had never heard from him before. "Do not blame yourself for things outside your control. You fought, you tried, and you are still here, still protecting your brother. That is what matters most." Ava lifted her head, green eyes blurred with tears meeting Tristan's eyes. But this time she did not see coldness or fear. She saw a man who had carried pain for 22 years, a man who understood loss, understood loneliness, understood what it meant to force yourself to stand when the whole world had turned away. They sat there in silence, with no need to say anything else. For the first time since her mother died, Ava felt understood, and for the first time in many years, Tristan felt the ice around his heart crack a little more. The next morning, just as the sun was breaking the horizon, Raymond knocked on Tristan's study door with a gravity he rarely wore on his face. He stepped in after he was allowed, closed the door carefully, and set a thick folder on Tristan's desk. In 20 years of following the shadow, Raymond had seen every kind of danger. But what he had just learned made even a hardened man like him uneasy. "Boss, we have a problem," Raymond said plainly, without any detours. "My men just reported that Castellan is watching the estate. He has had people surveilling us for a week now, and his target is the girl." Tristan looked up from the paperwork in front of him. His expression tightened. "Ava, why would Castellan care about a homeless girl?" Raymond opened the folder and slid it toward Tristan. "Because she is not only a homeless girl, boss. She is Thomas Monroe's daughter." The name stopped Tristan cold. Thomas Monroe. Even rookies knew the story of the man who betrayed Jerome Castellan 10 years ago, stole $2 million, and vanished without a trace. Castellan had put up a massive reward for anyone who found Thomas. But the man had seemed to evaporate off the face of the earth, and now his daughter was inside Tristan's own estate. Thomas Monroe, Castellan's traitor. Tristan repeated, his voice calm, but his eyes had turned razor sharp. "Yes, boss," Raymond nodded. "The girl does not know anything about her father's past. He left when she was 10. But Castellan does not care. To him, this is a chance to get revenge on Thomas and, at the same time, strike at you. She could bring danger down on us, boss. We should send her away before Castellan moves." Tristan rose and went to the window overlooking the garden below. He could see Noah running across the lawn, the boy's clear laughter drifting all the way up. And on a bench nearby, Ava sat watching her brother, her face far more peaceful than it had been in the first days she arrived. She did not know that the past of the father she hated was now threatening her life. Raymond was right. Keeping Ava and Noah here was a risk. Castellan was a dangerous enemy, and protecting them could drag the entire organization into a war they did not need. Reason told Tristan to do what any Mafia boss would do: drive them out, sever every tie, protect his own interests. But then he remembered last night. He remembered Ava's green eyes flooded with tears as she spoke of her mother. He remembered the sensation of being understood for the first time in 22 years. He remembered the cold indifference of the world that once nearly broke him. He had sworn never to become one of those who looked away from a soul in need. He had sworn he would never become one of those people, the kind who turned away from someone in need because it was inconvenient. She has nothing to do with her father's sins, Tristan said, his voice firm, without hesitation. Increase security around the estate. Double the number of men on watch. They are staying. Raymond stared at Tristan with open surprise. In 20 years, he had never seen the boss make a decision that could endanger the organization for an outsider, but he also knew that once Tristan decided, no one could change his mind. Yes, boss. Raymond nodded. I will arrange it immediately. And Raymond. Tristan turned back, gray eyes cold as ice. Prepare everything. If Castellan wants war, I will give him war. That afternoon, Maggie came to Ava and Noah's room and said Mr. Blackwood wanted to see Ava alone in his study. Ava felt anxious at once, because for the past 2 weeks, Tristan had never once summoned her to speak with him one-on-one. She asked Maggie to watch Noah for a little while, then followed the familiar hallway to the book-filled room she had entered the night before. When she knocked and stepped inside, Tristan was standing by the window with his back to her, his tall frame cast in silhouette against the fading afternoon light. Sit down, he said without turning, his voice lower and more serious than usual. Ava sat in the chair across from the desk, her hands laced together on her lap from sheer tension. She did not know what was waiting for her, but instinct warned her this would not be an ordinary conversation. Tristan turned, walked to the desk, and sat down in the chair behind it, eyes fixed on her. I need to ask you about your father. Who is your father? What do you know about him? Ava blinked, startled that the question was about the man she had tried to forget for 10 years. The familiar anger rose in her chest, along with a pain she had thought had faded long ago. My father left when I was 10, she answered, her voice hardening. He never contacted us again. Not a single call, not a single letter, nothing at all. He left my mother alone to raise 2 children, and when my mother got sick, he did not show up then either. I hate him. Tristan was silent for a moment, as if weighing how to continue. Then he opened a drawer, took out the folder Raymond had given him that morning, and slid it toward Ava. Your father is not the ordinary man you think he was, he said, his voice low and careful. He was once part of the underworld, working for a criminal organization. 10 years ago, he betrayed that organization, stole a large sum of money, and disappeared. Ava stared at the folder as if it were a poisonous snake that could strike her at any moment. No, that is impossible. My father was just an ordinary man who abandoned his family. He was an accountant. He left because he was being hunted. Tristan cut in, his tone unwavering. And now his enemy knows you are here. They are looking for you to take revenge. Ava's world seemed to collapse in a single instant. She sat there, her mind spinning, trying to process what she had just heard. Her father was a criminal. Her father had betrayed the Mafia, and now someone was hunting her because of what he had done. Everything she thought she knew about her life suddenly felt foreign and terrifying. Noah, she whispered, her voice shaking, is my brother in danger? Tristan looked straight into her green eyes, brimming with fear, and he spoke with absolute certainty. No one will touch either of you while you are here. I promise. That was the breaking point. Ava began to cry, not the quiet tears she was used to, but the sobbing of someone who had carried too much for too long. She cried from rage at the father who had abandoned them and left a wreckage she was forced to carry. She cried from fear for Noah, the little brother she had sworn to protect at any cost. And she cried from confusion over the man sitting before her, the man she knew was dangerous, yet the only one standing on her side. I hate him, Ava said through tears, her voice shattered. He left us. He let my mother die in poverty. He made me and Noah live on the streets. And now, Even after he is gone, he is still destroying our lives." Tristan stood, moved around the desk, and came to her. He did not speak. He simply set his hand on Ava's shoulder, a simple gesture that held the steadiness she needed in that moment. Ava did not shrug him off the way she thought she would. Instead, she sat there and let the warmth of his hand seep through the thin fabric of her shirt. Let his presence comfort her in a way no words could have. In that silent room, two people from different worlds found an invisible thread tying them together, woven from pain, loss, and a promise of protection Tristan knew he would keep at any cost. A week had passed since Ava learned the truth about her father, and although the fear was still there, the air inside the Blackwood estate was slowly becoming warmer, in a strange way she had never expected. Noah was completely well now, the boy racing through the house with the boundless energy of an 8-year-old, his clear laughter echoing down hallways that had once felt cold and silent. Maggie doted on him like her own grandchild, always baking cookies and telling him fairy tales before bed. And what surprised Ava most was the relationship between Noah and Tristan. The boy did not seem afraid at all of the Mafia boss the entire city feared. Whenever he saw Tristan, Noah ran over to greet him, to tell him what he had learned that day, or simply to sit quietly in the study drawing while Tristan worked. And Tristan, the cold man even Raymond treated with caution, never sent the boy away. He allowed Noah to stay, sometimes glancing at the boy's clumsy drawings, and sometimes Ava even saw the corner of his mouth lift slightly when Noah said something innocent. For the past several days, Noah had been secretly drawing a picture he would not show anyone, not even Ava. He hid it under his pillow every night, and whenever his sister asked, he only smiled mysteriously and said it was a special surprise. Ava did not think much of it, assuming it was just a child's game. But that evening, after dinner, Noah asked Maggie for permission to see Uncle Tristan, and he carried the finished drawing with a seriousness that was almost funny. Ava followed her brother to the study, curious about what he was planning. She stood at the doorway and watched as Noah walked in, approached Tristan, who was seated behind his desk, and held the picture out with both hands, as if it were something sacred. "I drew this for you, Uncle Tristan," Noah said, brown eyes shining. Tristan took the drawing, and Ava could see him go still as stone as he looked down at it. She stepped a little closer to see, and her throat tightened. The picture showed 3 people holding hands in front of a large house. On the left was a long-haired, brown-haired girl, Ava, recognized as herself. On the right was a small boy with a wide grin that was clearly Noah. And in the middle was a tall man in a black suit with black hair and eyes colored in gray. Above them was a bright yellow sun, and beneath it was the crooked handwriting of an 8-year-old child. "My family." "Noah," Ava blurted, her face flushing with embarrassment. "Do not bother Uncle Tristan. You should not. This is the most beautiful picture I have ever been given." Tristan cut her off, his voice gentle, in a way Ava had never heard before. He looked at Noah, and in that moment Ava saw something in his eyes soften and melt. "Thank you." Noah beamed, delighted that his gift had been accepted. Ava stood there, not knowing what to say, her heart pounding with feelings she did not dare name. She watched Tristan looking at the drawing, watched Noah smiling, and she wondered if this was the family her brother longed for, and whether she had any right to long for the same thing. But the warmth of that moment shattered when the phone rang. Tristan glanced at the screen, and at once his face hardened as if someone had thrown ice water over him. He read the message, eyes darkening, then he stood in a rush. "I have to go. Right now." He passed by Ava without looking at her, without explaining, without turning back. She heard his quick footsteps in the hallway, heard him giving orders to Raymond, then the sound of an engine roaring and tearing into the night. It all happened in seconds, so fast Ava did not have time to react. She stood there staring at the empty doorway, and the familiar feeling of abandonment crashed over her like a wave. She thought of her father, remembered the morning 10 years ago when he had left in the same way, without a single explanation, without a single goodbye. And now Tristan had done it too. Right after receiving the picture, Noah had spent a whole week drawing. "Sister." Noah's voice trembled beside her, pulling Ava out of her thoughts. She looked down and saw worry filling her brother's eyes. "Uncle Tristan will come back, will he not, sister? He will not leave like our father did, right?" Ava knelt and pulled Noah into her arms, trying to hide the unease in her own eyes. "I do not know, Noah," she whispered, and it was the truth. She did not know whether Tristan would come back. She did not know whether she should trust him. She did not know whether her own heart was betraying her. Meanwhile, the black Maybach was slicing through the night at maximum speed. Tristan sat in the back seat, eyes cold as ice, one hand clenched into a fist. Raymond's message had been only a few words. Castellan is about to move. Tonight. And Tristan knew he had to act before the darkness could reach the house where a boy had just given him the first family picture of his life. The next morning, Tristan still had not returned. Ava woke with dark circles under her eyes from a night of barely sleeping, glancing toward the window every time she heard a sound, hoping it was the noise of his car coming back. But only silence answered her, and the worry swelled inside her chest like a balloon expanding until it hurt. She told herself she was foolish to care, that Tristan was only a Mafia boss who had happened to save her, that he owed her no explanation at all. But her heart would not obey her reason, and the image of him leaving into the night kept haunting her without mercy. Noah noticed Tristan's absence too. The boy harassed Ava all morning when Uncle Tristan was coming back, why he was not eating breakfast with them, whether he liked the picture. Ava tried to answer with soothing words, that Uncle Tristan was busy, that he would be back soon, that there was nothing to worry about. But she could see anxiety in her brother's brown eyes, and it made her hurt even more. That afternoon, to help Noah shake it off, and to give herself a way out of the four walls that were making her feel trapped, Ava decided to take him outside to play in the garden. The grounds behind the mansion were cool and green, with neatly trimmed lawns, flower beds bursting with color, and a swing hanging beneath the branches of an ancient oak tree that Noah loved. She thought that within the estate, with a large security detail guarding the perimeter, they would be safe. But she was wrong. Jerome Castellan had been waiting for this chance, and Tristan's absence was the perfect moment he needed. He knew facing the shadow head-on would be foolish, but when the wolf went hunting far from the den, the sheep at home became easier to seize than ever. He sent a decoy assault at the front gate of the estate, creating gunfire and screams to draw the security team's attention and pull their full force to the front. And while that was happening, another team slipped in silently from the back garden, where only Ava and Noah were, carefree and unaware. Ava heard something wrong before she saw them. The rustle of leaves, the quick cadence of footsteps, and then 5 men in black emerged from the shrubs around them, surrounding her and Noah from every side. Ava's heart seemed to skip as she realized they were not Tristan's guards, and her survival instinct surged to life. "Noah, run!" she screamed, shoving him toward the house. "Run inside and find Maggie." But one attacker was faster, cutting Noah off before the boy could make it 3 steps. Noah screamed in terror, and that scream struck a match to Ava's fury. She was not the helpless girl from the streets anymore. She was the sister who had sworn to protect her brother at any cost. Ava lunged for the man holding Noah, snatched up a fallen branch from the ground, and swung it hard into his head. The man staggered and let go, and Ava shoved Noah behind her. She stood there with the branch in her hands like a sword, green eyes burning with resolve. "Do not touch my brother," she snarled, her voice shaking, but not from fear. The attackers glanced at one another and laughed, as if a skinny girl trying to fight 5 men was the funniest thing they had ever seen. Ava did not care. She knew she could not win, but she would fight to the end. She swung the branch at the first man who rushed her, cracking it against his shoulder. She dodged the second man's punch and kicked his shin. She screamed, scratched, bit, did anything she could to protect Noah sobbing behind her. But she was 1, and they were 5. A punch to her stomach doubled her over. A kick to her leg brought her down. Then someone grabbed her hair and yanked her head back. The last thing Ava heard before darkness swallowed her was Noah's anguished wail, "Sister, sister." And then there was nothing. Dozens of kilometers away, Tristan was in the car on the way back to the estate after handling the threat Raymond had reported the night before. It turned out to be only a small group from Castellan trying to harass one of his business operations, and Tristan had dealt with them quickly. He was thinking about the picture Noah had given him, about the crooked words "my family," about the strange warmth of being called family for the first time in 22 years. His phone rang, and when he saw Raymond's name on the screen, he knew something was wrong. "Boss." Raymond's voice trembled, something Tristan had never heard in 20 years. "They have been taken. Ava and Noah. Castellan moved while you were gone. I am sorry." Tristan said nothing. He sat still in the car, the phone pressed to his ear, but he could not hear anything anymore. Raymond kept talking on the other end, explaining the decoy assault, explaining how the security team had been fooled, but the words were only a dull buzzing inside Tristan's head. He had promised, He had promised Ava that no one would touch them, and he had broken that promise. Raymond would later tell others he had never seen the boss so terrifying. Not because Tristan shouted or destroyed anything, but because of his absolute silence. His gaze turned as dark as a storm-laden sky, his face empty of expression. Yet the air around him grew so cold it felt as if it could freeze solid. This was not the anger of an ordinary man. This was the wrath of the shadow, the man all of Chicago feared. Find them. Tristan finally spoke, his voice cold as ice and sharp as a blade. At any cost. And Raymond, prepare everything. Castellan wants war. He will have war. Ava woke in the dark, her head aching as if someone had struck it with a hammer. She tried to open her eyes, but even the dim light in the room was enough to sting. The smell of damp and dust burned in her nose, and when she tried to move, her whole body protested with sharp jolts of pain. Memory rushed back. Men in black, the desperate fight in the garden, and Noah's terrified screaming. Noah. Where was her little brother? Noah. Ava tried to shout, but her voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Panic flared as she searched the dark room, her heart hammering in her chest, and then she saw him. Noah was curled in a corner, knees hugged tight to his chest, small shoulders shaking from crying. He was alive. Her little brother was alive. Ava crawled to him, ignoring the pain that tore through her body. She pulled him into her arms and held him tight, as if she feared someone would rip him away from her again. Noah lifted his face, brown eyes swollen red from tears, his small face streaked with grime and wet tracks. Sister, I am so scared. Noah sobbed, small fingers clutching Ava's shirt. Who are they? Why did they take us? I want to go home. I want to see Uncle Tristan. Ava did not know what to say. She only held him tighter, whispering comfort she was not even sure she believed. I am here. Do not be afraid. I will protect you. Everything will be all right. The clack of a metal bolt made Ava flinch. She shoved Noah behind her at once and forced herself to stand, even though her legs trembled and wanted to buckle. The heavy iron door swung open, and a man stepped in, followed by 2 large guards. The man looked to be around 42, with black hair streaked with silver, and a long scar running from the corner of his left eye down to his chin. His dark brown eyes were cold as a snake's when they fixed on Ava, and the smile on his mouth made her shudder. Thomas Monroe's daughter is finally awake, he said, slow and dripping with contempt. You look so much like your father. The same eyes, the same stubbornness. He had that look too when he betrayed me. Ava tried to keep her voice steady even as her heart beat wildly. I do not know who you are. I have nothing to do with my father. He abandoned us 10 years ago. Jerome Castellan laughed, the sound chilling in the damp room. You have nothing to do with him. You carry his blood. That is the only connection I need. A father's sins are carried by the child. That is the rule of this world, girl. A rule your father should have taught you before he ran. Ava stood in front of Noah, her hands clenched into fists, even though she knew she had no chance against these men. Then what do you want? Money. I do not have any. My father left us nothing but debt and misery. Money. Jerome stepped closer, his eyes bright with malice. I do not need your money. You have something more valuable than money. You have Tristan Blackwood's attention, and that is what I need. Ava felt her blood turn cold at Tristan's name. She remembered his promise. She remembered the way he set his hand on her shoulder. She remembered gray eyes looking at her with absolute certainty, but she also remembered the way he had left the night before, without a single explanation. Blackwood will come to rescue you. Jerome went on, as if he were reading her thoughts. I know he will come. He has grown soft because of you and that child, and that softness will be his death. When he comes here, I will end it all. The shadow will fall because of a girl from the streets, and I will be the one who rules Chicago. Ava saw the brutal truth. She and Noah were nothing but pawns on the board between 2 mafia bosses. Jerome did not care about revenge on her father. He only wanted to use her to destroy Tristan. And if Tristan came to save her, he would walk straight into the trap. You think he will come? Ava asked, her voice steadier than she expected. I am only a homeless girl he happened to save. I am not that important. Jerome laughed loudly. You lie terribly, girl. I have watched the Blackwood estate for 2 weeks. I saw the way he looks at you. I saw the way he treats the child. The shadow has a weakness, and that weakness is you. He turned and walked out, leaving Ava and Noah in the dark room with 2 guards posted outside. When the door shut, Ava sank down, pulled Noah into her arms, and for the first time since her mother died, she allowed herself to pray. She prayed that Tristan would come, but she also prayed he would be wise enough not to fall into the trap. She did not want him to die because of her. "Tristan," she whispered into the darkness. "Will you come?" Night fell over Chicago like a massive black curtain, and within that darkness, Tristan Blackwood moved like the name people whispered for him. A shadow that could not be seen yet was more deadly than anything else. It took his team 6 hours to find where Jerome was holding Ava and Noah, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, guarded by more than 20 gunmen. 6 hours in which Tristan did not eat, did not drink, did not rest, only sat in the command room and issued orders in a voice cold as ice. 6 hours in which everyone around him felt as if they were standing beside a bomb about to detonate. Now, when the convoy stopped a short distance from the warehouse, Raymond turned to Tristan with worry he did not bother to hide. "Boss, this could be a trap. Castellan knows you will come. He is waiting." Tristan opened the car door and stepped out in his familiar black suit, eyes hard as steel sweeping over the warehouse ahead. "I know, but they are in there." Nothing more needed to be said. Tristan signaled, and his men moved. 30 of Tristan's people advanced like ghosts, silent and lethal. They had done this hundreds of times, and under the Shadow's command, they were the most feared force in Chicago. The rescue unfolded fast and efficient. Jerome's gunmen were taken down one by one, given no chance to fight back against a unit that was expertly trained and more driven than ever. Tristan never slowed. He moved through the warehouse like a storm, eyes always searching for the 2 people he had come to save. When Tristan reached the iron door at the end of the hallway, Raymond reported the area was secured. Tristan did not wait, did not hesitate. He drove his boot into the door and blasted it wide open. Inside the dark room, Ava heard the noise and sprang up at once, shoving Noah behind her, both hands raised, ready to fight even though she knew she had no chance. She was ready to die to protect her brother, ready to face whoever came through that door. But when the hall light spilled in and she saw the outline of the man in the doorway, tall in a black suit, eyes searching for her in the dark, every ounce of strength in her body seemed to dissolve. "You came," Ava whispered, her voice breaking, and the tears she had fought back for hours finally spilled free. Tristan stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping over Ava, registering the bruises on her face, then dropping to Noah, hiding behind his sister. He moved closer, knelt in front of the boy, and his voice softened in a way Ava had never heard before. "Are you hurt? Did anyone touch you?" Noah shook his head, brown eyes still red from crying but now shining with joy and relief. "Uncle Tristan, I knew you would come. I told Sister Ava you would come save us." Then the boy threw himself into Tristan's arms, clinging as if afraid he might vanish. Tristan froze for a second, as if he did not know how to respond, then slowly lifted his arms and held the child, his embrace strong yet gentle. He looked up at Ava, and without a word he extended his free hand to her. Ava did not hesitate. She rushed into Tristan's arms, her face pressed to his chest, letting her tears soak into the expensive suit he did not care about. For the first time, all 3 of them held one another, inside the filthy dark room of an abandoned warehouse. Yet for Ava, it was the warmest moment she had known since her mother died. "I promised," Tristan said, his voice catching in a way that was strange for him. "I promised no one would be allowed to touch either of you. I am sorry I let this happen, I thought." Ava sobbed, unable to finish. "I thought you left us. That night, you went without saying anything, and I thought—" "Never," Tristan cut her off, his certainty absolute. "I left that night because I got word Castellan was about to move. I went to stop him before he could get near you. I will never abandon you." Ava wept against his shoulder, every fear, every doubt, every old wound loosening in that moment. And Noah, an 8-year-old who had already endured too much, only held tightly to both of them, a happy smile on his mouth even as tears still clung to his cheeks. Raymond appeared in the doorway and delivered a brief report. "Boss, Castellan has been captured. How do you want to handle him?" Tristan slowly released Ava and Noah, stood up, and in that instant, he became the Shadow again, the most notorious Mafia boss in Chicago. "Take me to him." Jerome Castellan was on his knees in the yard outside the warehouse, hands tied behind his back, Tristan's gunmen surrounding him. The scar on his face twitched when he saw Tristan approach. but he still tried to hold on to his arrogance. "Blackwood," he spat. "Kill me if you dare. You and I both know that is how this world works." Tristan stopped in front of Jerome and looked down at the enemy who had threatened the people he cared about. 22 years ago, if someone had done the same, Tristan would not have hesitated to end his life. But today, when he looked back and saw Ava and Noah standing in the warehouse doorway, he realized he was not that man anymore. "Castellan, I am sparing your life today," Tristan said, his voice cold as ice. "But if you look toward them again, if you dare even think about touching them one more time, I will make you regret you were ever born into this world." He turned to Raymond. "Hand him over to the police along with all the evidence of his illegal operations. Let the law deal with him." Jerome's mouth fell open, unable to believe what he had just heard. Tristan did not care about his reaction anymore. He turned away and walked back to Ava and Noah, gently setting his hands on both their shoulders. "Let us go home." When the Maybach stopped in front of the Blackwood estate, Maggie was already waiting at the door, her eyes red from worry. She rushed forward and wrapped Noah in her arms the moment he stepped out of the car, checking every small scratch on him, then hurried him inside to bathe and eat. Noah was exhausted after everything that had happened, and only after he managed to swallow half a bowl of hot porridge Maggie prepared, the boy fell asleep in her arms, with the family picture he had drawn for Tristan tucked neatly under his pillow. Ava sat by Noah's bed, watching her brother's peaceful face in sleep. She refused to bathe. She refused to eat. She refused to leave him for even a second. The bruises on her body still ached, but physical pain was nothing compared to the fear she still could not release. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the men in black again, heard Noah screaming again, felt that helplessness again, the horror of not being able to protect him. Soft footsteps sounded at the bedroom door. Ava did not need to turn to know who it was. She had grown used to his presence, used to the way he watched from a distance without intruding, used to the strange sense of safety he brought with him. "You need rest, too." Tristan's voice came from the doorway, low and warm. "You have not slept for more than a day." Ava shook her head, eyes never leaving Noah. "I cannot sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see them taking Noah. I see him crying and calling my name, and I cannot do anything." Tristan stepped into the room, his feet making no sound on the wooden floor. He pulled a chair close and sat beside Ava, near enough that she could feel the warmth of him, but not so close that it would make her uneasy. "They will never touch either of you again," he said, his certainty like an oath. "I have made sure of it." Ava turned to look at him, and in the dim light of the bedside lamp she saw the exhaustion on his face, the strain etched around his eyes, and something else she could not name. She had wanted to ask this question for a long time, ever since the first night he saved them on a Chicago sidewalk. And now, after everything that had happened, she did not want to wait any longer. "Why?" she asked, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and emotion. "Why did you do all of this? Who are you, that you would risk your life for a homeless girl and her little brother? You could have left us that night. You could have thrown us out when you learned Castellan was after me. You could have left us in that warehouse. Why did you not?" Tristan was silent for a long time, his eyes fixed on the empty space ahead, as if searching for an answer in distant memories. Then he spoke, his voice low and slow, as if each word had to be weighed carefully. "Because for the first time in a lifetime of silence, I finally feel I have a reason to come home," he said, still staring forward. "Before I met the two of you, this house was only an empty mansion. I came here to sleep, to work, nothing more. But since Noah's laughter began to echo down the halls, since you began sitting in the living room reading, everything has been different." He turned to Ava, and for the first time she saw those eyes soften, as if the ice covering them were melting. "Because of Noah's laughter. Because of your eyes. Because for the first time in my life, I do not want to lose something. I do not want to lose you." Tears spilled down Ava's cheeks, but not from sadness or fear the way they had before. She cried from being moved, because for the first time since her father left, she felt she mattered to someone. She cried because the man the entire city feared was sitting here telling her she was the reason he came home. She reached out and took Tristan's hand where it rested on his thigh. His hand was warm and rough, the hand of a man who had lived through too much, but when his fingers tightened gently around hers, Ava felt safer than she ever had. "I want to stay," she said, her voice trembling but sure. "Not because it is safe, not because I have nowhere else to go. Because I want to be with you." Because for the first time since my mother died, I feel like I belong somewhere." Tristan looked at her, and in a silence that seemed to stretch into forever, their eyes met, needing no other words. Then he lifted her hand gently, brought it to his lips, and pressed a kiss as light as a butterfly to the back of it. The gesture was so tender Ava could hardly believe it came from the man they called the Shadow. "Then stay," he said, his voice going rough. "Stay with me." A year had passed since that fateful night, and life inside the Blackwood estate had changed in ways no one could have imagined. Ava had begun college in a nursing program, the dream she once had to set aside when her mother fell ill and the family slid into hardship. Every morning she woke in a warm room, ate breakfast with Noah and Tristan, then had Raymond drive her to school. She studied hard, not only for herself, but because she wanted to prove to Tristan that he had not been wrong to believe in her. And every evening, when she came home with stacks of books and assignments, Tristan was always there, listening as she told him about her day with an attention she once thought he was incapable of showing. Noah was 9 now, and he had transformed completely from the thin, sick child Tristan found on the sidewalk the year before. He went to one of the best private schools in Chicago, had friends, had teachers who adored him, and most of all, he had a gift for drawing that was being nurtured under the guidance of a private art teacher Tristan hired. Noah's drawings now hung all over the estate, from the living room to Tristan's study, and everyone carried the same message, the image of a happy family. As for Tristan, he had gradually withdrawn from the organization's most dangerous dealings, handing much of the work to Raymond and focusing on making the businesses legitimate. He was still the Shadow, still the name that made Chicago's criminals tremble, but he was no longer directly involved in the darkest jobs the way he once had been. When asked why, he only said he had things more important to protect, and he did not want to bring darkness home to a house where Noah's laughter echoed. Maggie, the housekeeper who had been by Tristan's side since he first stepped into the underworld, often stood in a corner watching the three of them with tear-bright eyes. She told Raymond she had never seen the young master smile so much, never seen him eat dinner with someone instead of alone in his study, never seen him come home early just to watch Noah show off a new drawing. "This is the haven the young master deserves," she would often say. "A life with family, not just cold walls." One spring evening, when the flowers in the garden were in full bloom and the air was heavy with sweet fragrance, Tristan came to Ava's room with a look of mystery she had never seen on him before. "Come with me," he said, holding out his hand. "There is something I want to show you." Ava set her textbook down, took his hand with curiosity, and let him lead her. They walked down the long hallway, down the staircase, and out the back door into the garden. And when Ava stepped outside, she stopped, her mouth falling open in astonishment. The garden behind the mansion had been transformed into a fairy tale. Thousands of tiny lights glittered from the tree branches, creating an artificial sky of stars right in the heart of the city. Vases of red and white roses lined the path, and at the end of the walkway strewn with petals sat the stone bench where they often spent weekend afternoons together. "Tristan," Ava whispered, her heart beating faster as she began to understand what was happening. "What is this?" Tristan did not answer. He guided her down the path, soft petals beneath their feet, lights shimmering in the gray of his eyes. When they reached the end, he stopped and turned to face her, and Ava realized his hand was trembling slightly. It was the first time she had ever seen the Shadow, the man all of Chicago feared, look nervous. Slowly he reached into his suit pocket and drew out a tiny red velvet box. Then he dropped to one knee, lifted his face to Ava, and in his eyes she saw every emotion he had hidden for his entire life. "Ava," he began, his voice low and faintly unsteady, something she had never heard from him before. "I have lived in darkness for 22 years. I did not believe in love. I did not believe in family. I did not believe a man like me deserved happiness. I built an empire, but I never had a place of belonging. I had everything money could buy, but I never had anyone to come home to." He opened the box, and inside was a diamond ring sparkling under the lights, simple yet elegant, just like Ava. "Then you appeared," he went on, eyes never leaving hers. "You and Noah walked into my life on my darkest night, and you brought light with you. You taught me that being strong does not mean being alone, that having someone to protect is not weakness, it is a reason to become stronger. You turned this empty house into a sanctuary, and you turned my frozen heart into something that could love." Tears were already running down Ava's cheeks, but she did not bother to wipe them away. She only stood there, looking at the man kneeling before her, the man who had saved her from the streets, protected her from danger, and given her and Noah a family. "I am not perfect," Tristan said, his voice catching. "I have a dark past, sins I can never erase, but I promise, I swear by everything I have, I will spend the rest of my life loving you, protecting you, and making you happy." He lifted the ring, eyes fixed on her with all the sincerity he could give. "Ava Monroe, will you be my wife?" Ava could not speak. She only nodded, tears pouring down, and she whispered in the most trembling voice she had ever had. "Yes, yes, I will." Tristan rose, his hands shaking as he slid the ring onto her finger. Then he pulled her into his arms, and Ava rested her head against his chest and listened to his heart, strong and steady. And then, from behind a rose bush, a small figure burst out with a shout of joy. She said yes. She said yes. Noah ran to them, brown eyes blazing with happiness, a wide grin on his face. Ava looked at Tristan in surprise, and he only shrugged with a rare smile. "I needed a witness," he said simply. Noah threw his arms around both of them, and in the garden glowing with lights, 3 people who had once been lost and alone held one another, laughter and happy tears mingling together. That night, beneath an artificial sky of stars, a real family was formed, not by blood, but by love, sacrifice, and a promise to stay together forever. 3 months after the proposal, the garden of the Blackwood estate was dressed in splendor once more, but this time for an occasion far more special. Tristan and Ava's wedding was not a lavish event with hundreds of guests, the kind people might expect from the wealthiest boss in Chicago. Instead, it was a small, intimate ceremony, with only the closest people, the ones who had witnessed and walked beside this strange love story from the beginning. Raymond stood in the front row, for the first time in 20 years not wearing his usual severe black suit, but a light gray one instead. Beside him sat Dr. Crane, the man who saved Noah's life on that first night, along with a few of the most trusted men in the organization, men Tristan considered brothers. Maggie sat in the family section, her handkerchief already soaked with tears even though the ceremony had not yet begun. She had cared for Tristan like her own son since he was a lost teenager, and today she would watch him find a happiness she once believed he would never have. When the wedding music began, everyone rose and turned toward the end of the red carpeted aisle, but the first to appear was not the bride. It was a 9-year-old boy, in a tiny black suit, brown hair neatly combed, eyes bright with pride. Noah walked slowly and solemnly, carrying a red velvet pillow with the wedding rings resting on it, shoulders straight and head held high, as if this were the most important mission of his life. When he passed Tristan, he winked mischievously, and Tristan had to fight back a smile to keep his face serious. Then Ava appeared, and everything around Tristan seemed to stop. She walked forward in a simple yet elegant white dress, brown hair swept up to reveal the long line of her neck, green eyes shining like gemstones. No one walked her down the aisle, because her father had abandoned her long ago, and her mother was gone, but she did not need that. She walked on her own, strong and unbreakable as she had always been, toward the man waiting for her at the end of the aisle. When Ava stood before Tristan beneath an arch of white roses, the pastor began the ceremony. But the most important moment came when they spoke their vows, words not written ahead of time, but drawn from the deepest part of their hearts. Tristan took Ava's hand, eyes locked on hers, and he said, "Ava, I used to be darkness. I lived in darkness. I did dark things, and I believed darkness was all I deserved. But you came and taught me that even darkness can find light, that even the coldest hearts can melt. You and Noah are the light of my life, the reason I want to become a better man. I promise, in front of everyone here, that I will protect you and Noah until my last breath, that I will love you both with everything I have, and that I will never let you be alone or afraid again." Ava gripped his hand, tears sliding down her cheeks, but her smile was brighter than it had ever been. She answered, "Tristan, I used to think I had to be strong alone. I used to think leaning on someone was weakness, that trusting someone was foolish. But you taught me that real strength is daring to open your heart, daring to trust, daring to love even when you know you can be hurt. You have saved me and Noah not just once, but every day, by staying with us, by loving us. I choose to trust you, today and forever." When the pastor declared them husband and wife, Tristan bent to kiss Ava, a kiss gentle and full of promise. Applause rose. Maggie sobbed openly, and Raymond, for the first time in 20 years, wore a real smile, but the most moving moment still had not arrived. As soon as Tristan and Ava ended their kiss, Noah ran up, small feet bouncing over the petal-strewn carpet, and he flung his arms around both of them. "Now Uncle Tristan is my dad," Noah shouted, brown eyes blazing. Then he stopped, looked up at Tristan, and for the first time he used a new name. "Dad. My dad." Tristan went still, and those who knew him could see something happening inside him. The shadow, the man the whole city feared, the man who had never cried in front of anyone, tried to hold himself steady and failed. His eyes reddened, and when he dropped to his knees and gathered Noah into his arms, his voice broke. "Yes, my son. Dad is here. Dad will always be here." And in a garden filled with late afternoon sun and the scent of flowers, a family was officially formed, not by blood, but by love, sacrifice, and promises that would be kept for a lifetime. 10 years after that fateful night, Chicago was still the bustling city of soaring skyscrapers and crowded streets, but the lives of the three people who had once met on that cold sidewalk had changed completely in ways no one could have imagined. Tristan Blackwood was 47 now, black hair threaded with more silver at the temples, yet his gaze were still sharp and his posture still straight as a pine. He had fully left the underworld behind, transforming every operation into legitimate and successful businesses. But what made him proudest was not the vast business empire. It was the charitable foundation he created called Light in the Darkness, dedicated to helping the homeless and street children of Chicago. Every year, hundreds of people received shelter, food, and a chance to begin again through that foundation. And Tristan often said he did it because he knew what loneliness and despair on the streets felt like. Ava was 30 now, a beautiful, confident, grown woman, nothing like the thin, frightened girl she had been. She had completed her nursing degree and now worked at a free clinic for the poor in the neighborhood where she once lived homeless. Each day she cared for patients who had no money for hospitals, families struggling the way her own family once had, and she did it with a love and understanding only someone who had lived through the same hardship could carry. And Noah, the thin, sick 8-year-old boy of those days, was now an 18-year-old young man, tall and handsome, with a warm smile inherited from his mother, and brown eyes that always lit with a passion for art. He had just graduated high school with outstanding results and received a full scholarship to one of the most prestigious art universities in the United States. But before he began the new term, there was one important event he needed to complete: his first solo art exhibition. The exhibition was held at a renowned art gallery in downtown Chicago, and on opening night the place was packed with art lovers, critics, and reporters. But among all the paintings on display, one hung in the central position and drew every eye. It was a large canvas of a winter night in Chicago. Soft snow falling, streetlights casting a dim golden glow. At the center was the image of a tall man in a black suit kneeling, reaching out his hand to a young woman holding a small boy on the sidewalk. The man's face was not as cold as one might expect, but held tenderness and determination. And the girl's eyes, though filled with fear, still held a thin thread of hope. The title was written in gold letters: "The Night Everything Changed." A reporter stepped up to Noah, held a microphone out, and asked, "This painting feels very personal. What does it mean to you?" Noah looked toward the painting, then over to his parents, standing not far away, hand in hand, and he smiled. "This is the night my dad found us, the night our lives truly began. I painted it not only to tell my family's story, but to remind people that sometimes what feels like the darkest moment can be the beginning of the most wonderful things." Tristan and Ava stood before the painting, looking at the image of themselves 10 years earlier. Ava squeezed her husband's hand and whispered, "Did you ever imagine that night that we would have today? That a homeless girl and a mafia boss would become husband and wife, would have a happy family like this?" Tristan looked at his wife, gray eyes warm in a way only Ava and Noah ever saw. "No, I did not imagine it. But I know one thing. That night, when I saw you sitting on the sidewalk holding Noah, I found a reason to live. For the first time in 22 years, I had a reason to come return to those I love." Noah walked up beside his parents, the young man now nearly as tall as Tristan, shoulders broad and posture confident. He looked at his father, and in those brown eyes was deep gratitude. "Dad, I want you to know something," Noah said, his voice low and mature. "I used to resent fate because my birth mother died so early, because my birth father abandoned us, because I had to live on the streets when I was too young. I used to ask why life was so unfair to me. He paused, glanced toward his sister, then looked back at his father. But now I understand. All of it led me to you, to this family. If life had not pushed me onto that sidewalk that night, I would never have met you. I would not change anything, Dad. I would not change a single moment. Tristan looked at his son, and for the first time in a long while, he felt his eyes burn. He reached out and pulled Noah into his arms, the way he had held the thin 8-year-old 10 years before, and his voice caught. Me too, my son. Me too. You and your mother are the best things that ever happened to me. And the story that began with a mafia boss, seeing a young woman holding her brother on a Chicago sidewalk on a winter night, became a story of love, redemption, and family, proving that sometimes the brightest light comes from the darkest places. This story gives us a profound lesson about life, that we should never judge someone by their appearance or their past, because inside every person, there is the capacity to love and change. It also reminds us that family does not have to be formed by blood. It can be built from love, sacrifice, and trust. And most importantly, no matter how hard life pushes you into difficult circumstances, keep your faith and hope. Because sometimes the darkest moments are the beginning of the most wonderful things. If this story touched your heart, please press the like button and share it with the people you love. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss our exciting videos every day. We would love to know how you feel about this story and whether it reminds you of anything in real life. Please leave a comment below to share what is deepest in your heart, because every story, every opinion you share, is precious motivation for us to keep creating meaningful content. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and peace each day. Thank you for being with us. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.